You are.
Okay. Thank you. Hello, my name is Lashanna, and I get to live in Seattle, Washington right now. I wanted to first say thank you to everybody who is attending and watching right now. Thank you for setting aside the physical time, the emotional time, and I honor that and appreciate it. I'm going to be super honest and just say that I'm super sad and I'm mad and I'm angry, and I still have a belly that is full of love and full of hope. And I am here with you all today pretty raw, and I'm going to do the best that I can to give you the best that I can today. When we organized this, everything was chaotic as it is, yet not so raw. So thank you for your grace and your patience with me. I do have a presentation, and we will get to that in just a second. I want to honor all learning styles, and so having a visual can be important. It's pretty short. It's about 9 slides, and then you can get to the good stuff, which is conversation. So I hope that you feel comfortable asking questions, and like Nora said, put them in the chat, and hopefully we get to them. So let me share my screen. Nora, I need your help with that. Before I share, I'll tell you a little bit about the work that I get to do here in Seattle. I am a death doula and a massage therapist and a death care community educator. It is a blessing to be able to do the things that I get to do and serve my community and other humans in the ways that I can. Let's see. There we go.
You should be able to share them now.
Okay.
There we go. Thanks.
Are we there? We're good.
Yep. Thank you.
Okay. So I like to start with a poem by Shel Silverstein, The Invitation. If you are a dreamer, come in. If you are a dreamer, a wisher, a liar, a hoper, a prayer, a magic bean buyer. If you are a pretender, come sit by the fire, for we have some flax golden tales to spin. Come in, come in. The reason I like to start with this poem is because I feel like it's also a message from death, because it is our shared experience. We are all birthed and we all die. And death welcomes us all at different times, in different ways, and at different stages of our life. So the question of what is a death doula? A death doula is a person that cares for the living, the dying, and the dead. A death doula shows up in many different ways. They are our bath aides. They are our social workers. They are nurses. They are neighbors. They are aunts. We have recently been sold the idea that a death doula is this certified individual who will come and lead you to your best death. That's a very, very recent construct. Women of color have been taking care of our dying and our dead for hundreds of years. Hundreds of years. The label of a death doula is recently has been talked about and elevated recently. Death left the home during the Civil War. The Civil War and capitalism are what drew our ability to tend to our dead away. With capitalism, the powers that be realized that they could make some money around this and gave it to some gatekeepers, and all of a sudden it was run by white men in funeral homes, and it left the home. that we started to lose our knowledge of what caring for the dead was like. And in a couple of generations, it went poof and gone, and our dead were then taken to a place that was outside of the home. Which leads me to talk about why death doula is a thing right now. In this country, there is a generation of folks who are dying quickly and at high numbers. There are a lot of older folks right now, and a lot of them are white, and they're dying uncomfortable, long, and expensive deaths in the current medical structure that we have. And when white men are uncomfortable, this country does backflips to make them comfy. What makes them comfortable? Being cared for, being tended to. Doulas bring comfort and they help. And white women have been able to create a profession out of this work. And they have positioned themselves as gatekeepers to push for certification and a legitimization of the field. I forgot a word there. And so it's a buzz. It's a profession, and the work is needed. So everybody is talking about it again, which, aside from why, the fact that we are talking about it is amazing and welcome and helpful for everybody. What do death doulas do? All of death doulas are different. Some folks just handle paperwork, and some people care for folks physically. You really have to engage in what you would like, how you would like to be cared for, what you expect, and what you need. Death doulas can educate you about your rights. They can make sure that you have your paperwork in order. In this country, there are lots of legal documents that are necessary to be completed at the end of life, and a doula can help you with that. They can provide respite care and companionship. They can help with creative ways to create legacy. Some folks organize your space and help get things in order so that you're not leaving a hot mess of stuff behind for folks. Death doulas can also act as home funeral guides and help prepare a vigil. And after you die, they can help facilitate a home wake. They can help with disposition arrangements and help and educate your family on how to tend to you, and support folks in medical aid and dying as well, depending on what state you're in. It's not legal everywhere. How do folks pick a death doula? This is kind of silly. If you have access to the internet, Google. Search and find all of the names of people near you and talk to them. Reach out to organizations that you trust for referrals. It's important that when you are looking for a doula, you think about things that are important to you. How do people communicate? Are they able to communicate over the phone? Do they text? Do they only communicate over email? Where are they located? If you have a doula who's amazing and really vibes with you, but they're an hour and a half away, how often are you going to be able to interact, and what will that support look like if that person is so far from you? Make sure that the doula that you reach out to has experience in the areas that are important to you. If you know that you would like to have a home wake and you choose a doula who has no experience in that, it may not be to your benefit. So really, really interview these folks. Make sure that if death is facing you, that this person is going to be around. If they're about to go globetrot, I'm going to pause for a minute because globetrotting sounds absolutely beautiful in a moment of quarantine. And I'm just going to honor that feeling for a second. Travel. Okay. So if they're going to go and take a vacation, you need to make sure that they have backup, and that backup is someone who you like and who works with you well. Check their references, and most importantly, trust your gut. Meet with them if you can. Have coffee, have tea, share a meal, learn about them and who they are, and make sure that that fits well with you. I spoke briefly about medical aid and dying support. This here is very specific to Washington State. Medical aid and dying can be an absolutely phenomenal choice for folks. If that is what they choose, having the ability to access it is amazing. There are certain steps that you have to go through in order to access medical aid and dying in Washington State. You need 2 referrals from a doctor, which can be very difficult to access, depending on your location, your finances, your insurance. There is an organization in Washington called End of Life Washington, who has volunteers who will walk you through this process. Medical aid and dying should not just be something that is open and accessible to folks with insurance, folks with the internet, and folks that can afford the prescription. It should be an option for anybody who chooses to reach it. If energy is neither created or destroyed, I am sure we have met sometime before. I leave all of my clients with this note because I think that in some way, shape, or form, we have met before and we will meet again. And it's comforting for all of us and something I like to say. Those were my slides. Let's see. There we go. And so now it's conversation time.
Thank you so much, Leshawna. I'll give folks a little bit. Please put your questions into the chat or the Q&A, or if you're joining us from Facebook, go ahead and put it in the comments there, and Beverly will monitor that. One question that I have for you, Leshawna, is what's the difference between hospice care and a death doula, and do they work together?
When folks are lucky, everybody works together. A death doula is support, not only for the dying person and their family, but hospice benefits from a death doula being around. I have had several folks who are on hospice and who have accessed my care, and death doulas fill in the gaps. Hospice is a medical unit, and death doulas are not. All of the care that we provide is non-medical. So we work from different ways to support that dying experience.
So some questions are coming in. How do you become a doula?
I think service is the first step. Volunteering in organizations that care for the dead. There are the dying and the dead. Sometimes local hospices will have volunteer openings. Maybe it's for respite. It might be for errands. There are numerous training opportunities for folks. Really learning and getting comfortable with death and dying, and learning the actual physical process is important. What happens to a body as we die. There are emotional components for you as a doula that you need to work through. I think that, walking that walk and figuring out the things that you have to deal with around death and getting education and training are some steps.
Do you have any advice on how to start a conversation with older relatives about their end-of-life plan, especially if there's a particular religious path and they are hesitant to address death and dying? There's a lot of questions in that question.
That's what I was just like, how do I answer that question a little bit? I think if there's a particular religious path, then you have to honor that with that person and really talking to them about what it looks like. You know, what does this, what does dying look like to you? Asking people and understanding like how their family has traditionally done death will help you access ways to engage with them. Also sharing about what you might want is a way to engage people in your family. If you say, it's really important to me that you all know what I want in case anything happens, because accidents happen. And explaining to your family what you want might open the door for them to say, okay, this is what I want. Also explaining or bringing up the idea that when someone dies, having things in order to the best of your ability gives you and the other folks who are still alive an opportunity to grieve. You are not pushed into this moment of having to act and react and handle all kinds of affairs, because some of the answers are down on paper for you already. So it can be a gift.
I'm not sure if I even know this answer, but how long have you been doing this work, Leshawna?
A little over 5 years.
Okay, so I've known you the whole time. So have you seen any changes in how dying, has dying changed in your career, or are you seeing death shifting in the future?
I think dying looks different for everybody. The ways that as a populace that we talk about death have shifted. I think that it's been elevated in different ways. Some are spiritual, some are practical, some are because of technology and environmental concerns. So the angles in which I think that we talk about death have changed, especially environmentally. What are we doing to the planet when we die? That's been probably the newest way that I think folks are engaging with that.
Yeah, we see that a lot at People's Memorial too, people starting the conversation kind of from the environmental impact front, yeah. Has Death Doula services been impacted by COVID-19, and how are you adapting?
Dramatically.
Yeah.
Yeah. Depending on where folks are, access to them has been cut off. The folks that I care for that are in care facilities, I get screenshots of conversations and pictures from their family members because they are typically allowed like one Skype call a week, and that goes to family. So I will communicate with family and send pictures of things that are going on in my life. And if they can get them to them, they do. I write letters and cards. I think it's a unique opportunity for current establishments to recognize that if they had a death doula close to them or someone with these skills, the folks in their care could be cared for differently. They wouldn't be relying on a nurse who's got to check meds and rotate and do all of these things to also run a Skype call.
Yeah.
And also say, how are you today? Can I scratch your head? How are your feet? You know, these people who are doing the work in these places are also now being asked to do more. So I do think that this pandemic is might soften the folks who have previously not welcomed death doulas into a space to say, you know what, let's work together and do good for everybody that way. That's a long answer to that question.
Oh, it's what is needed to be heard right now. Someone says, thank you for doing the panel and lending your time and expertise. The question is, are there certifications that you need to be a doula?
No. That is an idea that has been packaged so neatly and sold to us. There are certifications that you need to do certain things. To lay hands on a body in some states, you need a license. I'm a massage therapist. To provide that type of therapy to someone, I need a license. To put makeup on someone who's dead. You need to be a funeral director or mortician in some states. um, I'm following the rule of the law for this conversation. There are some things that you have to be licensed for, but to care for folks who are dying, no, you don't. You need to be able to show up, have it not be about you, and be authentic with your skills and your offerings.
Yeah, and that's a good thing to clarify as well, because I know we have as we're learning this format as well, we're realizing that we are having people join us from places that aren't local to us. So the rules do vary state by state and country by country. So unfortunately, we are most well versed in Washington State because that's where we are. So you'll have to look up the rules in whatever jurisdiction you're in to see how those change. But no, in Washington State, you don't need certification or licensure to help out a family who is experiencing a death.
I will add a caveat to that.
Okay.
That's helping and not charging. So there are definitely rules. If you're charging for services, you absolutely have to check in your state to see what that involves. The National Home Funeral Alliance, on their website, they have a great breakdown by state with the laws, and it's really accessible.
Maybe Beverly can find that and drop that in the chat for everyone.
Would you repeat what the link was? I'm sorry, I was reading through questions.
The Home Funeral Alliance resources page, yeah. You mentioned being a massage therapist. How did you find your way from massage therapy to being a death doula? And they want to know how you market your skills. How do you let people know you're available for this work?
I found my way to working with folks who are dying through massage. A lot of my clients were older and in care facilities, and I am a toucher just by nature, and recognizing that when I was in with clients doing massage work, how rare it was that someone would come in and touch them without a purpose. It was always, are you warm? Does that hurt? What is this? I'm going to poke this and move you here and twist you and turn you, but nobody was offering touch. And so it was this realization of the lack of gentle, non-investigative touch that people experience at the end of their life that made me start looking at other ways that I could engage with people as they were dying. I trained, someone told me that there was a death doula course about 2 hours north of Seattle. And I was like, oh, I'm gonna look into that. And I trained with a woman up there and studied under her for a while. And then when she went off to nursing school, she gave me the nonprofit that she had. So I've been able to do community education. Market myself, I don't so much. Where I make my money is massage therapy. My death work is much more of service to the community and community education. I do have some paying clients, but it's not something I market. Yeah, word of mouth, people will be like, oh, she can take care of you.
Yeah.
And people will call me.
So there's been a lot of kind of similar vein questions, so I'm going to try and lump them together myself. Is if people want training in order to do this, or what other fields can they look into if this seems like something they want to do? I'm going to co-op for just a second. And Leshawna briefly mentioned about being a hospice volunteer. There are several, of course, now I know we've got people in California, and I think said someone from Mississippi. Local hospice organizations are actually wonderful places to volunteer for, and there are several levels of interaction you can have with families, so you can figure out how comfortable you are at a few different levels. And so that, as the daughter of a hospice physician, this is a place where I started, and I wholly recommend it as a place to start looking into if it's something you feel called to do. And as Leshawna also said, there's a few different home funeral training courses. I've seen them advertised all over the country. I was trained in California. Lashanna was trained up in Bellingham. Again, the Home Funeral Alliance is a wonderful resource for looking at finding local people who can help you with that avenue. But I will also turn that over to Lashanna if there's anything that I have missed there.
Yeah, I think that thinking, I don't know what that noise is, sorry if you all can hear it. I think that thinking about what you like to do, what can you offer, what feels good to you, where are your strengths, and then working backwards, where are they needed? If you are an artist, how can you engage with art and death? Maybe there is a activities director that really needs some support, and you can volunteer doing some art classes with folks at a senior center. But really sitting with the things that you like and that you want to offer first, and moving from there. Hospices are great. And the shelters are great. Reach out to the community organizations in your area and see what's needed. Home Funeral Alliance does education on home funeral guides, and National End of Life Doula Association has a bunch of trainers on there, just to separate the two.
Right. Someone is a new widow and wants to know if there's a recommended time frame before training to become a death doula.
Recommended, I think you would have to sit with yourself. Some organizations require you to be a year from a great loss in your life. But I think that's a personal move, and something that you have to sit with yourself a little bit honestly and figure out, like, what are your emotional needs right now as you're grieving, to make sure that you can take care of yourself in that grief, while especially if you're going to be tending to someone else and all of their grief, just to make sure that you can hold space for yourself.
Yeah, when I was training to become a hospice volunteer, one of the questions they had for me was, when was the most recent loss in your life? And their usual answer was, yeah, you needed to be a year out from a major loss. And my grandfather had died within the last 6 months, but I was aware enough of myself that I said, this is not going to impact the work that I'm going to be doing. So hopefully you find an organization that listens to who you are rather than a arbitrary date on a calendar. Beverly, are there any questions from Facebook that you want to throw in there? Oh, okay, here we go.
Well, no, people are really excited to talk to you, Leshawna. We've been having folks from all over the world contact us about this, so give me just a second. I know we did have some folks who were curious about if you had any suggestions about engaging this subject with personal, intimate partners, talking. I'm not sure if they mean taking it on as a profession or about accessing these services. Maybe we touch a little on both. How to start these really sensitive conversations with the people we're close to.
So if we could start with the care aspect of it. Being honest about needing support at the end of your life. It's so much easier when there are multiple people there to help. If you picture a game, tug of war is so not warm and fuzzy. But if you think about it, like, is it easier to pull when there's 4 or 5 people? Yeah. And dying is hard.
We've never done it before. We've never done it before. Yeah.
Well, I
This
mean,
is
watching
new.
it, right? It's hard work.
Don't worry, I'm taking notes.
And like, the people around are working hard too, but that person who is dying is doing really, really hard work. And being able to support them is important. So expressing the need and the desire for folks around you to be supported in your death is a way to bring it up. A fun way to bring it up, if I might say so, is like the planning aspect of it, to talk about the little details, the things that mean a whole lot to you. What kind of music do you want surrounding you while you're alive? And then when you are dead, can you make a playlist? Would you then compare your playlists? Now that's always a ton of fun. Like who's showing up on both playlists, and who do you say don't play it at all? You can create or talk about some ways that you would like your legacy to stay around. What are some ways that you hope that you're remembered? Creating symbols for people to think of when you're gone. Those are ways that when folks who are dying know that they're going to be remembered, and then you say, "Yep, there they are," in that robin, or I smell apple pie. I'm thinking of such and such. They can be really meaningful. So starting with some small nuggets of planning can be an easy way to engage in that.
We did have someone who was curious, speaking of trying to find the fun in all of it. Could you maybe share a way that you've been able to honor or support someone in their dying process that respects their privacy, but maybe something that, like really stuck out to you as special or impactful or maybe kind of quirky?
Yeah. I think I'm drawn into the land of the quirk. So many of the people so many of the people that I've cared for have had really touching and amazing ways of interacting and leaving things for their family. Recently, I cared for a nurse, and his clothing was taken to make masks.
You got me right. I'm a public health.
It was people wrote notes about him and shared them with the people who received the masks. There was a woman that I cared for where we painted rocks, and then everybody that she knew got a little bag of rocks to place around in different locations, so that she would be spreading some joy all over the place. I've made handkerchiefs out of clothing before for people. That by far, I think, is one of my most favorite things to do for folks is be given a pile of clothes and then come back with handkerchiefs that people who love, friends, family, can take with them. And it's when they're not there to give you a hug, like to wipe your tears or to hold it close, is great. And it's nice when they still smell like them.
And that could be something that is still utilized during this time of social distancing and COVID-19 in general. Something that we've been struggling with is how do we keep the ceremony and ritual of coming together when we can't be together. And tactile is so important as part of our processing, and the fact that we can't hug or hold hands is so difficult right now. But I can see being able to physically hold something made from the person's clothing and knowing that there are other people out there maybe with something also made of the same piece kind of thing. I can see that really being a way to be together when we can't. Okay, we've got on that note, I've got a few different questions basically around how do you emotionally support others doing this work and take care of yourself during doing this kind of work. I've got like 3 or 4 questions along that kind of vein.
To show up for others, I think I really check in with people. How are you doing today? I ask them if they drank water. Did you eat something? I am super privileged and have a garden. And I share things from my garden with folks that I know who do this work. I just let them know that I'm here in the ways that I can be. And so creating that community amongst people who are death care workers is important. It's not easy to be vulnerable and open and caring in a way and in a situation where there's a lot of grief and a lot of pain. Sometimes situations are happy. I've cared for a couple of folks who have had the ability to make a choice when they were going to end their life. And those days they were great for them. There was laughing and storytelling, and with an exuberance, their medicine was taken and they were like, bye. Which is something that you don't really think about when you think about people dying. So being able to hold space for the happy and the sad is important. My self-care, okay. I paint. I
We
try.
can confirm this, and you just for anybody that's watching, Leshawna just gifted us with a bunch of handmade pieces that just really changed our week. It meant a lot. So.
You'll make me cry.
I already started, so just get over here with me.
I have creative outlets, and I'm really honest about my emotions. I don't try to hold anything inside. Some folks will say, as a death doula, don't cry. It's like, I cry. I cry. I laugh. I'll sing. To some folks' dismay, maybe. But really being authentic with my emotions in my care is a way that I care for myself regularly.
Yeah, there is the fine line, and you learn it as you do it, of being present with your own emotions, but not making the situation about you.
Thank you.
But denying your own emotions doesn't lend anything to the situation as well. Of the times that I've cried in front of client families, it served to bring us closer together, because if someone wasn't crying in that situation, I would have thought that something was wrong with them. And it's being honest about what's going on, but not making it about you. And so it's a fine line to walk, and knowing that you need to step away if you can't be present for the family in that way. Someone asked, is it normal to be fearful of the dying and death and still want to be a death doula?
I am absolutely not the normal police. But I think that your emotions and your fears and your thoughts are valid. I do think that if you're afraid of the dying, that doing it alone is not maybe the best idea. Find a buddy. Find different ways to engage in it that you feel comfortable with. Also asking yourself, what are you afraid of? Like writing it out. Make a bubble map of what you're afraid of, why, and maybe some ways that you might feel better and more comfortable with it.
There was an interesting question that just came up on Facebook, and it might just be interesting because I came from a similar career background, but they were talking about being a healthcare provider and feeling called to move into death care and potentially pursuing a death doula career. Is there anything that you could suggest in terms of maybe resources that they could turn to for changing the frame of reference? As healthcare providers, so many of us consider death a failure. So it's really challenging to transition into work where there's such a thing as a good death or a joyful death, or like you said, the hold happy and sad. Is there anything that you could suggest to those folks to help kind of learn how to shift the perspective?
Well, I think starting first with the fact that we all die. Everything dies. Everything dies. Cars have a life cycle. Computers have a life cycle. Sea turtles live a certain number of years. Humans live a certain number of years. Like everything dies. So sitting with the fact that there is no failure in death is really important. But also then, if you're in that world already, how do you work within that world in death care? There's a meeting of the minds there, and just like with funeral directors who are like, oh, I want to do it differently. I'm like, stay put right where you are, and work with that world in a different way, with the access and the privilege that you have of being there already. How do you grow room for death care and healthcare?
Do you have one person is interested, do you have a preferred way that you really like to help educate other people about dying and death? Since you're saying, we all have our gifts that we can lend to these adjacent professions. What's your favorite?
I really like to do it in person, which I can't do right now. I get to do community education and education through the nonprofit that I work with.
What is it called? Remind us.
A Sacred Passing.
We're big fans.
And we do doula education, no certification. We do community education to small groups, large groups, families. We build specific educational programs. Like if you know that you want your family to do a death plan, then we construct something that's really comfortable and accessible for the people who are going to do it. So that's my favorite way is through the nonprofit.
I'll drop that link right here. Do you want to talk about the Pearl Collective at all? I was going to share your link at A Sacred Passing.
Yeah, sure. Thank you. Doula work is best done with other doulas. Being a doula by yourself is really, really hard. Not only because of logistical things like sitting a vigil. How do you sit a vigil for 24 hours a day for 3 days if that's what your family wants? You cannot do it by yourself. You need support. You also need people to talk about things with, to problem solve, to rely on for those check-ins of how are you doing today? I get the opportunity to work with an amazing group of doulas in the Pearl Collective. All of us practice really differently and stretch and grow each other in those ways. And we support each other differently. In service, we support each other in visual and honor the ways that we all practice outside of that.
And no one can do any aspect of this work alone, including the dying person, and having support around you, and especially surrounding yourself with people of different perspectives and talents and abilities is really key. I had friends who were unfortunately losing their daughter, and I had been with them for weeks talking with them about what their choices were and what they wanted to do. But then I had to leave town, and the fact that I could call upon friends to be able to step in when I couldn't, and people I trusted to take care of people. Fortunately, the family was able to do everything themselves after when the time did come. But anyone who's considering doing this work, find yourself a community in your area. If you're not here, if you're here, reach out to us, Leshawna, People's Morial, any of that. But this is a regrowing trend. I shouldn't say it's a new trend, because this is the way we used to handle everything before the modern funeral industry kind of took over in the last 100 years. And there's this great pendulum swing that's starting to happen as people realize that there is a different way to do things. And if you feel called to help with the work, there are probably others in your area, and find them.
We did have someone who was curious about maybe some of the challenges inherent in your profession outside from, all of it. They were kind of curious about, there's a lot of beautiful things that you've talked about and how to support someone. Is there any advice you can give for people on how to navigate family situations where, we're assuming you're going to focus on the person that's dying, but maybe if there's family disagreements or communication challenges or situations where maybe it's a little trickier?
I think the biggest challenge I wanted to mention is access. Who has access to death care? Mm-hmm. Who doesn't have access to death care? I'm rattling off lists in my head, but I'm just going to leave those questions with you to think about. And that's the biggest challenge for me is holding a space where I know that so many people do not have access to this care, and being able to work through that. That's my biggest challenge. Family challenges, you will never solve as a death doula. Those run deep. Sorry.
We've all been there.
Family dynamics are thick. What you can do is work from a harm reduction perspective. What can you do to make the best out of this situation and to honor folks in ways that are meaningful? Sometimes people need a job. If you have someone who's really cranky and causing a lot of problems around the time of a death, sometimes they just need a job. Ask them if they can fold some towels. Can you go grab this for me? Can you help me with this? People need a way, sometimes people need a way to feel engaged and drawn into the situation and also be a helper. So being aware of those type of situations just require a little bit of finessing.
We did have a couple of questions relating to medical aid and
Oh, we had a few questions around medical aid and dying.
someone was curious process. Oh, I'm sorry. My internet's not so great. We're interested about maybe special considerations or things that you do to support families where medical aid and dying is kind of the way things are headed.
Special considerations, not so much differently. The difference with medical aid and dying is there's no question on when that death is going to happen. So you can talk about all of the ways that someone wants to be remembered. Are there things that you would like to do? Are there things that you would like to eat? Are there songs that you want to hear? Like, what are the things that you would like to do? What are the things that your body will let you do? And you can engage in all of those things. There's a procedure for medical aid and dying. You can't eat for 12 hours before you take your medicine. So that meal that you wanted so much, it needs to be in advance. It's medical aid and dying provides families and the person who's dying with a wide window of opportunity to engage in closure.
Is there something that one might have to be especially cautious of as a doula with families, but also among the death care network?
There's all kinds of things. I know that's very vague. Yes.
That's a good answer.
Yeah. While you're thinking, it has to do also, everyone's circumstances are different. And part of knowing if you can handle this is being able to improvise and read the room and figure out what's needed in the moment. There's no checklist when it comes to this work. There's certain big things that do need to happen. That's a whole separate checklist. But if you are present to support a family, it's about listening to the needs at that point. Again, the circumstances will probably dictate the mood of the family. If it's personally, in occasions where I've been in a home where someone has lived a full life, they've been under hospice care for a while, they've had family support around them, it can be a very like a light atmosphere. There might even be some celebration, letting that the person has lived their life to completion. I've been offered drinks in homes when I have gone to pick up people. I've declined. But then other places, that grief is different for everybody, and you have to honor whatever place people are in. And you might have occasions where you have some people taking it one way and some people taking it very differently, and being able to reconcile the two. I had a family that a portion of the family was very distraught and upset and crying in one room, but I could see there was one young woman who was just very interested in everything that we were doing, and she wanted more practical hands-on time. So we had her help with the removal and picking up, and being able to see that there was different energies in the room was something that you need to be able to look out for in situations like that.
I also think being very aware of yourself and not judging a situation on what you think it should be like. making sure that you're not imposing your view. I don't like to dance in the land of shoulds, but making as a death doula, don't bring that agenda to someone else's death. I think that's a really important thing to consider. Also, really be aware of cultural differences. Depending on where and how you were grown, the ways and the things that you've seen may not be what you see when you walk into a house. And being aware and sensitive and honoring all of the differences while not adopting those differences, because that's cultural appropriation, is really important.
I'm really glad you brought up the respect and embrace of the different spiritual and cultural practices of serving different families. We have some folks that are a little bit curious about that. We've recently at PMA been trying to plug a little bit the collective heretical death studies, because those folks are doing some really wonderful scholarship about the cultural heritage of different death care populations. And so some folks are kind of interested in, maybe you could speak a little bit about, are there other names that death doulas have been called by, or even maybe terms that we use now to talk about the work that you guys do, or maybe have historically as well?
I couldn't even list all of the names that death workers are called, because they're not
Do you have
native.
any favorites?
Well, they're not native to my tongue. I wouldn't even be able to say what it's called in someone else's language. But the Radical Death Studies group, I think they did just share today their new platform, which is super accessible, that breaks down. There's 4 different categories. I saw it briefly, so I didn't remember them. But if you link their information in there, like their scholarship it's rich and it's
so good.
Yes, it's perfect. We can all learn from it.
Yeah, let me pull up the, I'll get the link for that in the chat, and I have another question queued up for you.
Well, while you're looking for that, there's a question about, with medical aid in dying, do you have to die indoors, or can you choose to die outdoors in nature?
In Washington State, you have to die in a private location. If that is outside in your backyard, that is permitted, but you can't go to the UW underneath the cherry trees and take your meds.
Who's gonna tell on you at that point?
The person who's right behind you.
Yeah. No, let's not encourage people to traumatize strangers.
That's true, I suppose. I've learned I have to be a little bit more careful in these webinars with the information I provide that might be taken more literally if someone watches it out of context. So I'm not telling you to break any laws.
Maybe you could tell us a little bit more about green burial space in the Seattle area. That's something we're all very interested in, and I know you know a lot about.
Yes, there is unfortunately not a certified green burial ground in the Seattle area. There are some cemeteries that you can have, there are many shades of green, and so you never have to be embalmed. But unfortunately, a cemetery can say if they require a grave liner, they can restrict the size and type of casket if they so care. I haven't heard of any that have denied a green casket, but some have said you do need a casket. You can't just have a shrouded body. And they will do whatever landscaping care that they normally do regardless. And there might be rules about the monument size and type, but it's all about what the cemetery will allow. It's all cemetery rules. They own the land, they make the rules. So you can get a greenish burial in Seattle, but there are no certified full natural burial grounds, green cemeteries in Seattle proper. The closest is up in Snohomish, and then there's one in Ferndale, so hour-and-a-half drive, probably faster these days. There's no traffic, unless I-5 is closed, but we will move on from that. And that there are other natural burial grounds being certified all the time. The Green Burial Council is the nonprofit that is the certifying entity, but basically let's define green burial. Let's go back a step. So green burial is placing a body directly in the earth using only biodegradable container or shroud, no outer burial container, vault, or liner in the grave, and then only a natural marker of some sort, no like traditional headstones or carved out markers. But depending on the green burial ground, they might not even allow markers. You may only be allowed to plant a tree right there or get GPS coordinates. Again, it depends on the natural burial ground. Just this last week, I had 2 different families call me who own land in Washington. None in Seattle, but one just outside Kent that they've got, I think he said it was about 300 acres, and it's up against a parkland, but he wants to make sure that when he and his wife pass away, they don't have any children, that it won't be, developed, having houses built on it or anything. So he was talking about turning it into a cemetery and a natural burial ground in order to keep the land as wild as possible. So that might be coming at both of these were very exploratory phone calls, so it might be a while before we see results. And the other one was in Okanagan County, north central Washington state. Is a family that had a sustainable cattle ranch for the last 30, 40 years that they're starting to wind down their operations on in their retirement. And they like the idea of maintaining the land as wild as it can be in perpetuity, so making it a natural burial ground. So if anyone out there has a plot of land, a couple acres that you want to keep pristine, an excellent way to ensure that is to turn it into a cemetery, depending on the state, country, everything. There are different rules. But if you have interest in doing that, I can connect you with the right people.
So it's also called a conservation burial ground if you want to do some research on your own. We're kind of pioneering it, maybe just a teeny bit here in Washington. So we love our land.
Yep.
Trying to find some sneaky ways to keep it safe. Speaking of burial grounds, someone is looking at some more creative problem solving with some of the issues we've already talked about. And so they're curious if hypothetically one had pre-purchased their burial plot in the state of Washington, would that count as private property that one could die in to be outside while doing medical aid and dying? Oh, I'm loving the creativity.
Well, I like where you're coming from, but no. When you buy a cemetery plot, you are buying the right to be buried in that plot. You're not buying the land itself. So just because you own the right doesn't mean you can do whatever you want with it. And that's why the cemetery can also say, you have to use a liner, you have to use our markers, we have to use these pesticides and herbicides and whatnot. So short answer, no.
Man,
no.
We're going to do what we want around here. Yeah, so we have some people that are really interested in maybe dipping their toes into some of the work you guys have been talking about. And for the folks here in Washington, we know you've already mentioned the folks at End of Life Washington. I'll go ahead and drop their link in the chat. Are there any other organizations that you know people could participate in? No One Dies Alone, or other organizations like that?
In Washington, we, at A Sacred Passing, we have a No One Dies Alone program that folks can volunteer with. End of Life Washington is a great organization to work with, either on an educational side or an actual human, like a volunteer client advisor is what they call some of the volunteers. Elder care facilities will take volunteers, see what they need. Community care is about finding out what your community needs and engaging that way. So talk to the establishments that are around you, and see what they need.
I just realized that it is after 5 right now. We can take 1 or 2 more questions, but Beverly, if you can drop the survey link in the chat. You will also get an email with this survey, but if everyone who attended can please let us know what you think of the presentation and what other presentations you would like to see us do. We're learning this new format, and this is how all of our programming at People's Memorial will be done for the time being. And we want to make sure that you're getting information that you need and want. So if you have any other recommendations for what we should do, or want to let us know what we should prioritize, please use the survey. You will, in the follow-up email that you will be getting, you will also be getting links for how you can contribute to a sacred passing and to People's Memorial to help us with the work that we do. Leshawna, someone's asking how they can find your artwork.
It's on Instagram and it's on my website. My website is antares.com or antareswellness.com. And then on Instagram, I am the Good Witch of Cascadia. But I like, regarding extra questions that we may not have gotten to, I really am about making myself a resource. So I am happy to schedule a phone call, answer an email, if you want to talk about any of this work. I do recognize what I'm saying. So I will ask Nora and Beverly to also include my email and my phone number in that follow-up email, so that you have those two ways to contact me.
And you can also, if you misplace something or you have general questions, you can reach us at People's Memorial. Let me drop this email in here for you at info@peoplesmemorial.org. Either I answer that, or I have this amazing intern who's very quick on the keyboard, and she will get right back to you, and we'll make sure you have access to whatever you need.
Thank you. Were there any other straggler questions that we missed, Beverly, from Facebook?
Well, I think that just about covered it. People definitely were interested in some, book recommendations, but I think if we just send them right over to the Collective for Radical Death Studies, that's probably going to be a pretty comprehensive resource. But maybe if anything jumps to mind for either of you guys, maybe something you hold close for yourselves.
Yeah, I would read Medical Apartheid. Yeah. If you are considering working with folks who are dying, it's really important that you learn how folks live.
And another resource for starting the difficult conversation with your family, there's a deck of cards called Go Wish, like Go Fish, but Go Wish. And it's a deck of cards that have statements written on them. And it's an exercise you can do when you're healthy, if you're facing a diagnosis or a terminal illness. They have statements written on them to help you prioritize what you want at end of life, and it's a great way to break the ice with people. We used them when my grandfather at 94 was saying that his body was failing him and he was not wanting to stick around much longer. And so as we were approaching his end of life care, having him choose his priorities, and this engineering, matter-of-fact guy who I had known my whole life, one of his top priorities was to experience human touch. And that would not have been my initial reaction to what he would have wanted. He was always very introverted and quiet, and the fact that that came up as one of his top priorities in his deck of cards really changed how he did VSED, the voluntary stopping of eating and drinking. And at any point when he was having a little bit of trouble staying awake, we'd crawl in bed and have a little cuddle. And that was never a relationship that we had before, because he had never asked for it. And this gave him the tool to be able to ask for that at that point.
Thank you for sharing that.
Yeah, those were such wonderful tools. And I know that hearing that from Nora has actually really been useful in my own family for having some conversations about that. So, just a lot of times bringing forward things that are meaningful to you can help maybe approach those topics with family members that you need to be having the conversation with.
I want to thank Leshawna for speaking with us today, especially at any point. You were one of the first people that reached out when the world was shutting down a few months ago to put together something in this new medium that we needed to get comfortable with. So I'm grateful to you for doing that, and grateful for being able to still do it today during this week that has, again, turned our lives upside down all over again. Thank you for Beverly for your help, and we will be in touch soon. Thank you to everyone who attended today and giving us your time.
Thank you.
Thank you.